Hey, this is Walter, your friendly neighborhood comic maker, and this is the second episode of the Illustrati Illcast. Illustrati is a Discord server that I run with a few of my artist friends, and in this episode we are talking about character design. So enjoy, and I'll catch you later.
Yeah, we'll drop a beat for you.
Feel it drawing in the air tonight.
All right, cool.
That was terrible.
All right, so are we ready to do this thing?
As ready as we'll ever be.
On that great note.
Welcome to the Illustrati Illcast, the podcast about comic making. With me is...
I'm Daniel Hooker. I'm an illustrator for a literacy organization, and I do comics on the side.
Naomi.
Oh, I thought you were going for a alphabetical. Hi, I'm Naomi Frankies. I am a freelance illustrator and comic book artist. That's it.
Hey, I'm Hoyt Silva. I'm also a freelance comic book artist and cover artist, and I draw Mongrel on Webtoon Canvas.
Oh, right. I forgot about that part.
Hey, I'm Walter. I'm also a full-time comic creator, writer, artist, and I do Shiver Bureau, Cubicles, and Hacksaw on Webtoon. Over and out.
And I'm the host, I guess, Ethan S. Burton. I draw Cog and Flame and Mechadoodle stuff. So today's topic is pre-design and character design, and we're starting with pre-design for characters, right? Characters? That's what we're doing today? Cool. So I guess the whole thing is just about character design today. So who of you does pre-design for your characters? I assume we all do. Anybody not do it?
I don't do a lot of it. I don't do as much of it as I should.
Yeah, I feel like we're all in that
get-
position.
Yeah, I pretty much do enough to get me started, and then that's about that.
Right.
How are we defining pre-design? Like, to what extent do we want to define pre-design for characters?
That's a good question. So, like Daniel, you said that you don't do as much as you should. So, how much do you do?
So like I'm working on a pitch for somebody right now, and because I'm working with another person, I've sent him a bunch of designs for characters. But there's a character reveal on the final page that I was just drawing last night. And even though I had a design for that character kind of previously done, I pretty much just scrapped it and made something up as I was drawing that page last night. So
Nice. So, do you do like front, side, back view of characters, or do you just do like a single drawing?
in my books that I've done, I do that for the main character. Like if I know there like 2 to 3 characters, they're going to be there a lot, I'll do that for them. But everybody else, I just kind of figure it out as I go.
Does anybody else do anything differently than that?
I will do, basically depending on what job I'm doing. Like if I'm getting specifically hired to do a character design, I'll do the whole turnaround sheet.
Right.
But a lot of my character designs for when I'm working on just comics is initial expression charts. Like I'll do like the character face doing a different extreme expressions, so I know how to keep them consistent, or I try to keep them consistent.
Mm-hmm.
And then fashion and mood boards. Like I do a lot of, thank you Pinterest, rabbit hole searching, where I'll try to find a lot of inspiration for fashion and general aesthetic and mood for the character. Because I think about that most of all when I'm thinking about drawing characters over and over again.
Smart.
Yeah.
I wish I did fashion boards. That's something I've seen like you do and seen other people do more recently that I think like is a huge help. That is something I'd like to start doing more of.
I don't know anything about fashion, really. Does anyone have any suggestions on how to do, like, how to get into that?
Yeah, I recently did one for, I think it all calls on, like, depends on what the story, like, calls for. I'm going to actually, like, spend time on, and, like, this next, like, short story I'm working on, it's going to be, like, a lot of, not necessarily costume, just, clothing changes, fashion changes for, like, the main character and a couple of the other characters, so I just did, like, a lot of, like, Googling and finding out and asking, asking my wife, asking her friends, asking, other people that I know, like, hey, what's going on with this? Like, is this popping? Is this like, does this look good? Does this look like something somebody at this age range would like wear today? Kind of thing.
Are slap bracelets still a thing?
Absolutely.
I don't know. I find it important just to like ask around too, just because, I don't know, just to stay in touch. I think like spend so much time by ourselves,
Yeah.
It's like good to get outside input on stuff like that, just like normal everyday stuff. And then I'll create a board like on Pinterest as well that like just has like random fashion stuff and stuff in line. I think like maybe I'll look at it a few times before I start, or if I'm stuck on anything like and trying to figure out like some kind of interesting shot or something, I'll go back to it and look at that stuff to get reacquainted with what I originally wanted to do, but just use it as like a guideline, I guess.
So that one thing that you were saying about like you were trying to design like multiple outfits for the character, like that's something that I do like pretty much for all my books. Like my characters are never wearing the same clothes. And I've always wondered about that. Like Superman always looks like Superman, and it's like really easy for people to attach to. But if I'm changing like outfits all the time, like do you think that's like detrimental at all to like the fandom?
I think it depends, man. If you can keep something that like strings it together, no matter how many outfits they change, the cop out is like just using the same color scheme. But like, you can if you can like think of something to keep throughout each one, I think you'd be fine. Like, I mean, like for example, if you had done like different outfits for like Metal Shark Bro in every one of them, like people would follow along, obviously, because he's like the big shark guy. Like it's like easy to like follow along on who that is. I think it's like when it gets confusing is like difficult. So, right.
I mean, it's similar to how like in movies, these Transformers, for example, they redesign Optimus Prime for every single movie, but you always know who Optimus Prime is, right?
Right.
There's also with characters that aren't like animated, like when you have real life actors portraying characters next to like an animated character, there's also a lot of character design that goes into the wardrobe for those actors. And so I use websites like Lookbook, which is a really great fashion website because it's not just like runway fashion, it's actual people putting together like streetwear looks and everything. Or you can just think of what kind of fashion suits this character's personality. So if their outfit changes every issue or every episode or whatever, they're a modest person who likes sweaters, so they're going to be in different kinds of sweaters often, so if there's not like a commonality in color scheme, just a commonality in like that level of fashion, that level of dress, like so if someone's out here stunting, they're going to come out here in their Nikes every day, like.
I think that you just touched on something, Naomi, that I think it'd be good for us to get into, which is like that how the outfit can affect how we perceive the character. Like how you're saying, if they're like modest and they're always wearing all these sweaters, like that says a lot about the character, and like the clothing choices can be very important. Does anyone have any thoughts on that? I guess
plenty of those.
I agree that it is important, but again, like it's like important to the degree that it's important for the story. You know what I mean? Like if like you have like if the story takes place within like let's say a short amount of time and the character doesn't have like time to like change clothes or whatever, then obviously having multiple outfits is like against the story that you're telling. I think it's just like situational for like how much of that stuff that you want to look into, that I'll look into at least personally, depending on like what it is, you know what I mean? Like I said, this story, like I want them to have a little bit more of a like fashion edge to it, so I did go a little deeper into it than I would like normally. I don't know, it all depends just on what it asks for.
I did sorry,
no, go ahead.
No, you're good.
For Harrow County, when I was doing I did the initial character designs for that. A lot of it was historical, but I knew there weren't a lot of outfit changes in that series because it was just like a mini series, just 4 issues. I think total there might have been 3 different outfits, but I relied a lot more instead of on like specific color themes or anything, accentuating like her features, like her actual like facial features, and defining like defining characteristics of a person's face versus like the same outfit. Like there were common chains through most of her outfits. Like she had a trench coat that she wore for most of her everyday outfits, and so underneath it might have changed, but the trench coat might have been the same, or the overall theme would have been like she was very into functionality over like fashion, like over the visual aesthetic of it. So a lot of her shared like pieces of her outfits were like she wore the same boots or like the same coat, you know, and everything else would have changed around it, but like one thing or a couple of fashion items would have been the same, like consistent.
I've done something similar with the first book that I was working on, where I've done a handful of outfit fit changes through the series, but the character's jacket is almost like a security blanket to them. So they always wear the same jacket over everything else.
I can relate to that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Get that trusty hoodie.
Yeah, man.
So, Naomi, you touched on some other reasons that you might choose for character costumes, basically. Does anybody have any thoughts on different reasons for costumes to be different, or like choices for costumes, I guess?
Like I said, probably like time also is a smart thing to dictate. Like if time has passed, you know, changing a person's outfit like obviously dictates that it's not the same time span in which you would wear one outfit, you know.
Oh yeah, especially if there's seasons, if there's enough time for seasons to change in your story.
Yeah, right.
Like you're not going to wear the same shorts and t-shirt they wore in summer when it's like middle of December, unless you're in Florida.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. One of the books that I work on is a kid's book. And we struggled with this in the planning meetings because we went back and forth on whether or not to give the character a different outfit at the start of the second day, which was 5 issues in. So for the first 4 issues, we were like, we don't really need to worry about it. Like, we need to think about it. And we finally decided to keep their clothes the same. But I think that's useful too for helping younger kids identify, which this is a book intended for like between like kindergarten and 3rd grade mostly.
Interesting. So yeah, I mean, it does definitely factor into identification of a character. Any other thoughts on this? I'm like blanking on a question to ask.
Well, you mentioned like character design based on like usefulness, I think it was what you said, or character like specific choices. And I think this is kind of, it's part of the pre-design and part of like the main character design aspect of the whole topic is, you know, what kind of choices does this character's personality lead them to make? Are they the kind of character who does a lot of, you know, hands-on outdoor work? Are they super athletic? Are they more into, you know, fashion and, you know, loungewear or whatever, all that stuff? What kind of person is your character? You know, that I think is a great place to start just in general when you're designing. Either it's the same kind of outfit, like you're using like the same outfit and mild variations, or if you're designing a bunch of different looks. It's an important question to ask yourself about your characters when you start looking for inspiration or looking for places to start with those designs.
So if you don't get a really solid, or I guess even if you do get a solid design for your character at the start, and you get partway into making something and realize something should be different about your character, do you think it's possible to make changes on the fly?
Yes. Because there's always a reason for a character to change their outfit, or like I think Walter, I think you had some issue like that with Metal Shark Bro.
Yeah, I mean, are we talking like, are you saying like change the outfit, like, you know, they went and put on a different shirt? Are you talking like change the outfit subtly because you don't want to draw it how you drew it?
I mean, anything about the character that in working on the project you think, oh man, it would really help this character or benefit the character to be different in some way.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I have done that from like one volume to the next, where it was a lot of like this, the way that I design my characters are around like things that I just personally like myself. Like I put some thought into like who I think the character is and like what they would wear, but it's basically gonna boils down to like, man, I wish I had those pair of pants, or I wish I had that jacket
and I basically kind of modify that to work with the character. And so like that's how I've like always approached things, like as far as like character designs. And since it took me 3 years to do one book, when I got to the second volume, like my taste had changed, so I ended up redesigning those characters. But I mean, the other times I change stuff too is just like when I go, man, this was a bad idea to design this way, and it's not fun to draw. And I find it either they changed their clothes or somehow their jacket got burnt or anything like that.
Yeah, that's a good point. So you mentioned something that about like you were just talking about how you always make your choices based on the stuff that you think is cool, and that makes me wonder, like, do any of you think that it's possible to get away from your own style when designing characters? Like, I feel like most artists, whenever we look at each other's artwork, like it's pretty easy to tell who did it, right? Not necessarily by the drawing style, but like even if somebody else drew your character, it's still fairly likely that we'll be able to tell. Do you think it's possible to like get outside of that, or should we even try to?
Do you mean more like when Hall was saying he was putting his personal style as in like design, like costume design onto the character, or do you mean like your art style in general?
I mean like costume style. Like I think it's pretty well known that people have drawing styles, but like style choices, I guess.
Okay. I think I love fashion. That's one of my things. I really like to see what clothing lines are putting out there, but I know a lot of it I'm like, I can't wear that. It's not meant for me or my body type. So I daydream a lot about fashion I would wear if I could like fit that. And then a lot of times that's the whole purpose of like OCs for me, or like drawing characters. I will just draw characters specifically for the excuse to draw them in outfits that I wish I could wear. Like these are looks that that would be fun to draw or fun to have interact with other characters. It's a little self-fulfillment wishing, I guess.
Well, isn't that why, like, that's one of the strong motivators for creating these things in the first place, is to live vicariously through another being in a way that we can't. So that makes sense to me.
I feel like I don't even have a style to apply to my characters. Like I've always been very much just like a t-shirt and jeans kind of guy, but at the same time I still feel like there are things that I like to do when designing characters. Although I guess really that said, I don't draw that many male characters, and I think I do find female fashion more interesting than fashion, and that might be part of the reason I like drawing female characters more. Like I'm drawing a cabbage dress on the screen right now.
Yeah,
if I drew a dude in a cabbage suit, that would seem weird to a lot of people, but a cabbage dress, people are more likely to go like, oh wow, that's interesting.
True.
So do you guys find, like, speaking of that, like, do you find that you repeat a lot of your design choices? Like there's certain themes that pop up in your designs. Like I know, like I tend to overuse hoodies, and I like popped collars. Like every character I draw seems to have a popped collar, or like a high collar leather jacket, or long sleeves that go past the wrists.
I think I for sure, because I'm a sucker for drawing drapery and like just fabric folds and everything, so I always find an excuse to put a character in something like baggy, like a big sweater, or like a flowing blouse or something at some point, just so I can draw the drapery. Like tight-fitting clothes, like form-fitting clothes are my nemesis, so I tend to avoid that for sure.
Yeah, I feel like I definitely tend towards certain shapes, definitely more angular stuff, but I don't know that I have specific articles of clothing that I use more frequently than others.
Yeah, same. I think I just try throwing. I try to not even draw clothes really. I just try to throw shapes onto the figures, and then to see what shapes I like, and then try to figure out like what type of outfit can I change these shapes into.
Well, that kind of touches onto like a character's silhouette. Like if you're designing, even if it's just like a character that has one, like a uniform or like an outfit that's going to be the main representation of this character. Like if they're an X-Men character, or a school uniform, or some anime level bullshit, that's amazing. Thinking of like their outfit in terms of like shape and silhouette is really smart, I think, because it helps your mind immediately recognize this character. Like this is a silhouette that I associate, or that you have come to associate with, character A versus character B. And then if you have the shapes in mind, like if you have like this character likes blocky tops or whatever, it helps you, I think, as the artist, draw it faster, because you become more familiar with it, and you're like, oh, these are the shortcut shapes that I can use to quickly get to this stage of drawing the character's outfit.
It also helps with recognizability for the reader, right?
Yeah.
Which optimal. Cool. So we've gone over costume design, redesign.
Does anyone reuse character designs that they've already developed. Like you mentioned, developing OCs. Naomi, do you ever take those that you've done for fun or for previous projects that didn't get used and then just kind of slip those designs in other places?
Absolutely. Especially if I have to do, like, a lot of times I've been doing licensed stuff, so like characters that have already been designed, or characters that I designed at the beginning of the project, and then I'll have to do background characters or like one-time characters that show up, you know, just for a brief interaction in the comic. And if I have to fill space with just characters, I'll slip in OCs, and I'll slip in like my friends' OCs just for funsies. If I know it's not going to be like a character that's going to be licensed, then it's just self-satisfying to do that, really, because you spend enough time with these characters, you're like, I'm going to draw them again any chance I get to some background character BS.
Yeah, I did so for Illustrati, we all drew like ourselves as villains. And of course it's going to come across super egotistical, but like I just really liked the way my character looked. And I was like, crap, like who is this guy? Like what is like his story? So like I wrote a story around that character and I pitched it, and they didn't take the pitch. And so I was like, crap. And I was like, all right, let me think of something else to do with this character. So I came up with another story. And he's not the main character, but he's like one of the main characters. So yeah, just like trying to get that character a story, just because like I sketched him. I think like all of my stories have come from like just random sketching or random drawing. And I'm like, hey, that character looks cool. Like what's the story behind that character? And that's where all of my stories have come from.
So, Hoyt, have you ever worked on a project where you've gotten characters from someone else, and how do you feel about like getting characters that you didn't design but you have to work with versus your own characters?
Yeah, I've done that like quite a few times. I've redesigned a lot of characters that I've worked on with other people. Dude, like, again, I think it all depends on like the task at hand. Like, if it's like filling in for somebody or like sort of trying to help somebody like catch up, and you got to kind of match what they're doing already. That's like one thing, you know.
Right.
But like a lot of that stuff's like done for speed, you know, to sort of like catch stuff up. If it's like I do a chapter of somebody else's story and they already have those characters designed, to a certain extent you're kind of stuck with what's there already, you know, because you got to try to keep continuity. They let you redesign stuff, that's nice. Depending again like on what's going to be used, what's not going to be used. I don't know, it presents its own like set of challenges, because you know, like I said, you either got to like try to fit it or they'll let you change it for your use. It can be fun though, I guess, like to figure out a lot of times at that point you don't really have to think as much about the problem solving, because like problem solving should be in the design, you know, even if it's not, and you at least know what you can't do with it, like you know, it just won't cover you for everything. I've definitely had instances where I didn't like the characters, and I put that story like mostly in like silhouette, and like mostly, you know, the silhouettes were like strong, but really the individual character designs are pretty boring, so I tried to lean more in the silhouette direction with that. It all depends, I think, just depends on like.
So do we all have preferences as to whether we work with pre-designed characters or our own designs, and is there anyone who prefers to do pre-designs to work with pre-designed characters?
I prefer to work with my own. Saying all what I just said, I prefer to work with my own stuff, because you know, like what Naomi was saying earlier, I think touches on something I often tell people too. Is that essentially like the story you're telling is the journey that these characters are going on. You know, the character is your vehicle that's gonna like go through this journey. So you kind of gotta like either outfit the character to get through the journey, like give the vehicle everything it needs to get through it, or you need to like design the journey to have like stops along the way where the character will be able to like to continue to like outfit what they need. So to a certain extent, I think about that in the character design as well, is like, what does this character need like during this story, and like what stuff can I give them now, what stuff like are we gonna like upgrade to later, you know?
Right. So
it depends.
Go ahead.
No, go.
So, like, I've noticed for myself that if I don't have to match the style of a character, I do sometimes like getting a pre-designed character, because it kind of takes a little bit of the stress off of me when I'm working on a story. And I was wondering if anybody else shared any of those feelings, or if you only like to work with characters that you've designed.
I haven't like actually worked too much with having to draw other people's characters. So I was trying to think if that's ever happened or not, but I think I would prefer definitely like doing like the way I think about it is like the whole reason I started with comics is because it's kind of like playing with toys again. And so if I'm designing the characters, it's like I got to pick like my favorite toys. But if I'm working with somebody else's characters, like I got the bottom of the pile as far as like the cool GI Joe to get, and it's like I got stuck with with this GI Joe when I wanted.
You're at your friend's house.
Yeah.
And your friend's like, you could play with this one.
Yeah, like I got Gung Ho, and I really wanted Snake Eyes, and it's just like it's not right.
I had that moment when I was working on Squirrel Girl for a couple issues, where I had to draw Squirrel Girl, and her uniform is the same, basically. And it was a brief moment where I got to kind of play around with her uniform, but it didn't end up getting used. But with the other characters outside of it, I got to do like their normal streetwear, when she's not Squirrel Girl. So that was kind of like a little retreat for me. Like, I can get my satisfaction, my design satisfaction out that way. But when it came to actually drawing the Squirrel Girl scenes, having an outfit that's already planned was really helpful, because then I could just focus on like the action and the narrative story of whenever she's in Squirrel Girl mode and fighting,
Right.
Or the one issue that had Peter Parker was in it, but he was as Peter Parker, not as Spider-Man. So I was like, okay, let me just draw Peter Parker in an outfit I really want him to see to be in, and then like just have that. I fully dressed him in something that Yusuke from Yu Hakusho would have worn, because
Awesome.
bring back high waist.
Well, I mean, the high waist is coming back, right? As far as I can
Yeah, absolutely. Get the acid wash high waist, the white
There you
sneakers, the Keds,
Turtleneck.
turtleneck.
tell. Can't wait for the denim suit, high waist.
Justin Timberlake better revive that look, man. That's the Canadian tuxedo.
Yeah. So, does anyone have any questions for each other? So I'm kind of out.
This is kind of a question about a question, but I'm just thinking a lot of people like doing character design, clearly, and a lot of people will come up at conventions and things and ask about characters. Do you have thoughts on, one, what type of questions you might get from people?
I've gotten questions from people asking about like designing characters in regards to body types and body shapes, because whenever I do character designs, if I have that level of freedom over the design, I will try and draw like a design of a body type that you don't normally see in comics. Like, a lot of times you'll see like the hourglass figure, the ideal, like especially with women, the ideal form, and I'm like, well, let me draw the everyday, and I've said this to people at conventions, and you just like, they were asking, where do you get your inspiration for different body types? I'm like, well, I look at my friends, because they're not all built.
Real people.
You look at real people, and it's just like, I want my friends to be able to see themselves represented, and I want that for like everyone who's reading these comics. It also kind of comes back and bites me a little bit, because I can't look at some characters that I've drawn for comics now without specifically seeing a person that I realize, like unconsciously, that I absolutely pulled inspiration from. Like Macy in Misfit City, I look now and I'm like, oh, this is absolutely Steens. This is just, I just drew Steens in a comic, and I didn't realize it until like after she was already designed and the book came out, and then Steens commented, and I'm like, we have the same eyebrows. I'm like, oh god, I just drew you. I just drew you into a comic. So.
Yeah, sometimes we're moving so fast that it's hard to even think about where the influence is coming from,
It's only after you've spent enough time with that character, that you start thinking about it a little more, and then you start realizing, that explains everything.
Well, since you brought that up, I'll ask everyone, I guess it can be kind of a hot button issue. How much thought do you put into like diversity when you're designing characters?
I think about it somewhat. Like, I try to add diversity, honestly, mostly for like visual reasons, because like if everybody is just like a cis white dude, it's kind of boring.
Right.
But if you like try to vary it up a little bit, then it's gonna make your story more interesting, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
that's how
I
I
agree.
think
I try to switch it up as often as possible with like mixing it up. Just I don't know, because I don't know. I think that's just like what I see in my life. Like, I have friends from all around the spectrum, so not having that represented in stuff, I think is like sort of unfair and like uninteresting and boring too. Unless the story like calls for it, unless the story like again like asks for like that specifically, and you're telling a story that somehow relates to that in some fashion or whatever. That's some kind of point you're trying to make or something. Like, it's
Sure,
that's fine. But I think like if it's just just going to be whatever, then in my opinion, it can be whatever, and it'll be fresher and more interesting if you do any kind of person of color versus just doing like, traditionally a white male dude as like main character. It's just because in comics here in the West, it's been done so much,
Right.
Like it's just, that's really, at the end of the day, like it's been done so many times that I think it's just fresher when it's not. It's just more interesting,
For sure.
Even if that's not even like a main part of the story, in my opinion. Like I think it's nice to see other things happening, I guess. I don't know. I guess I'm a person also that enjoys that, that enjoys seeing like different stuff and stuff that I haven't seen before, and like things put in a new light, even if it's something as like little as that, sometimes that's enough to like, at least keep playing for a little bit.
Yeah.
I think that's something I think a lot of people don't realize until they see something different, that they don't realize that it's different,
Right.
Or that they've been like, what they've been consuming has been consistently the same, until they're presented with something different. They're like, oh, this is,
Yeah, and that's like one of my favorite things about comics is that like, one, you can do that. Like that's one of my favorite storytelling tricks, is sort of present people with like, oh, it's this thing, to get people that like are interested in that thing, like to be like, oh, okay, cool, it's that thing. But those are actually like the people that I want to like have a conversation with through my work, so like those are the people that I want to like change their perspective or change their minds or change like whatever. So in that regard, like like I want them on board first by hitting the cliche or like hitting whatever, and then like flipping it on them,
Yeah.
I think that like that to me is really fun as a storyteller. Messing with people.
So is there any other, do we have questions for each other left before we get to our questions from viewers?
I have a question, because in my downtime between, the whole self-isolation and then like the art block that I've been struggling with, I've been watching and reading a lot more like anime and manga, and reminding myself about how fun character design can be, because especially when you watch anime, because sometimes it's just like, designers just really said,
They just go
this
for
looks
it.
cool and I want to do it and I'm gonna do it. So that in that same vein, are there any series or specific creators that you appreciate when you see them having just unrepentant fun with their character designs, and you try to bring that into yours as well? Like, do you try to just go, you know what, I don't feel like explaining the minutia of or the reality of this kind of character design, I just want to draw something, freaking metal as hell, like Metal Shark Pro Activate.
Nipples.
Yeah, I feel you on that. Like in Mongrel, we have a character that's like a tree, and it's just like a potted plant that talks, and that was just like a random, at first like I had drawn him as this like weird like lizard like dude, and then I just turned to Trey and I was like, you know what, like we're just doing whatever, like this guy, fuck it, I'm gonna make him a potted plant, like just a straight up potted plant, and so we changed it to that.
That's awesome.
One, because I was like, damn, this is gonna save me a lot of fucking time, because like it's like literally just like this one brush like dab and then quickly draw the pot like underneath it or whatever. So I was like, all right, it's a huge time saver. And I thought like just for the comedic effect of like that situation, I was like, man, it'd just be funny if there was this character that was a potted plant was talking. I don't know. And then we just ran with it, and that character's like so it's actually like a fan favorite right now. I'd say like most of the comments we get are about Gary the potted plant. So.
Gary! Oh, I love that so much.
That's awesome. As far as other artists that I really like their style, I was always a big fan of Hyung Tae Kim, and I used to try to emulate his work, and now I don't think I pull it into mine as much, although I wouldn't be surprised there's still some kind of like lingering, like fanboy things going on where I'm pulling in his design on. But yeah, like none of his designs ever made any sense to me. I just thought they looked cool, so I was like, yeah, I love it.
I think early Naomi, like baby Naomi, was super. I used to get Wizard magazines all the time, and like look at like I'd skip most of like the regular like big two comics, and then I'd skip to like where the anime and the manga stuff, like stuff from Dark Horse and Image was, because they put out Trigun. And then I had to Google. I just did a Google about it because I had to refresh my memory. One series that like I don't think I actually ever properly read, but I fully appreciated the art that I saw. Battle Chasers.
Yes.
Joe Madureira did it, and I'm like, it was so unrepentantly fun and ridiculous. Like this little kid with a giant gauntlet, like, and then giant mecha, and then just hot ladies with swords and tall boots. And I'm like, you know what? It's so fun. And I'm looking at it now, and I'm like, okay, one of the dudes is fully Guts from Berserk. Fully just a Guts ripoff from Berserk. But like, it just seemed, I'm like, I want to be able to do that one day. So like, I don't care. It's just fun to draw. Why did you design this character? It was fun. He seemed cool. Like literally, just Boku no Hero Academia. Like My Hero Academia is like
Yes.
the prime example of I just did it because it's fun. Like that's literally the design, the creator's like thing. It seemed like a really fun idea, and I'm gonna do it. So respect.
I'm mostly just influenced by just any cyberpunk stuff that I see. I just love all that stuff. So cool. Specifically, like recently, it's been Ryan Berry, who goes by 9 Monkeys on Instagram, and Adrian Dadich, I think is how you say his name, which I stumbled upon him on DeviantArt like many years ago, and I just love like these random characters that he puts out. They're all very cyberpunky, and I like subconsciously incorporate all those things, but I have a really hard time directly implanting things. I don't know about you guys.
As soon as you start thinking about how to do something, your brain just can't process that. There's the connection somehow breaks between your brain and your hand, and that's so frustrating. It's especially when you look at something and you can tell exactly what you like about that influence and what you want to incorporate. But I don't know. There's some kind of psychology trick there, I think.
9 Monkeys specifically, his character or his cybernetic designs are like a bunch of like interlocking tubes and stuff that just break my brain when I try and look at them. So like I have like zero chance of copying that anytime soon. Prime example of that. All right, so I think we've been going for like 45-ish minutes.
Take some questions.
Yeah.
So I think there was.
Did we have any questions from the YouTube last week?
Oh yeah, probably.
Last episode.
I'll look that up.
All right, cool. So Naomi, you did an awesome job of reading questions last time.
I can do that again.
Thank you. And for those of you who are watching us, you can ask us questions in our Discord under Illcast Questions. There's the Discord link. I'll put that in everybody's stream. And we will answer those questions for you.
I don't know if we have any questions that we didn't get to answer from the last one. I put thumbs up next to all the ones.
There's 3 at the end.
Yeah, but I just didn't know if we had any left over from the other. But this first one from Gamer Heroine. How do you challenge yourself and grow as an artist? What things do you find yourself wanting to get better at, and how do you achieve those goals? Wow. That's a good question.
Does anybody have any feelings on that? Strong feelings on that other than fear?
Initial response, afraid.
Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say like the way that I did it was like I got caught up a little bit in the whole like how do I become like a really great artist, and I had to step back and realize like what I was doing it for, and which was to make comics. And so I kind of jumped in and just started making comics, even though my art wasn't that great. And by making the comics and being motivated to make the comics, that kept me going, and I just happened to learn stuff as I was making those comics. And so I wasn't sitting there drawing like 100 hands to practice drawing hands. I drew 100 hands because I was telling a story and there just happened to be hands everywhere. And so it was kind of like practicing without like sitting down and just grinding out a bunch of hands or heads or so on and so forth.
You sat down and ground out like a million pages of comics.
Right.
Instead.
Yeah, but I wanted to do pages. I didn't really want to draw hands. I just kind of had to draw hands.
Good call.
Comics are like the fastest way to improve like your art, because you have to draw things. You have to draw that classroom.
Yeah.
You have to draw, those cars.
Yeah.
Just when you're doing it, but you're practicing, and then
you just let the tears stream down your face as you push through.
I think the tears are a big part of it. I think accepting that you're not great is a big part of growing. It's the people who are like, no, I'm not the best, and so why should I do it? Are the ones who don't actually do the work to get better.
Right.
Yeah. There's one of my favorite webcomics, Undivine. The Twitter name for the artist is like Cat Coconut or something like that. I can't remember. I always never forget like off the top of my head. But she's amazing. And she posted a while ago when she first started the comic. Her art was like, she had improved so much over just the process of making Undivine and making that art that she looked back at the beginning and was like, and she redid it. And like seeing the side-by-side comparison, you could see just how much she improved, how much she learned by making this comic. And I'm like, this is the prime example of, you're never gonna be perfect, enough to do this comic. So just do the comic and get better as you're doing it.
So it sounds like we're To sum up what it sounds like we're all saying is just keep moving forward, and that's the way to challenge yourself. Like, don't stop, just keep going, and eventually you'll
Just
get
keep swimming.
Yeah, just keep swimming. That's right.
Well, there. One of the questions, or one of the part of the questions was, what things do you find yourself wanting to get better at, and how do you achieve those goals?
Everything.
That's everything. Yeah. Like, we all want to get better at everything. Like, I focus a lot. Drawing people is kind of like my comfort thing to draw, because I'm like, I am a people. I know what people do, but I am not a car. So cars are hard. So having to draw more cars, and I had to draw so many trucks and bicycles and stuff for Harrow County that I'm just like, oh, bicycles. But I understand how they work now. Like, I drew them and I'm like, oh, they make sense now. I'm still not the best at drawing them, but like, I understand them a little better having broken them down. And I think one of the things I try to do when I have to draw those things is like break it down to the part, not like all the little itty bitty bolts and nuts and bolts, but like the shapes. Like a bicycle has 2 wheels. It's got the front wheel that turns. It's on the one axis, separate axis connected to the handle, and then it's got the main chassis, and like the rest of the bike is connected on that one chassis, like that one. I don't know if that's a word for it. I don't know technical words. I'm not a bike expert, but
it makes sense. I'm picking up what you're putting down.
Oh, sweet. I was just dropping things. So yeah, just break it down to whatever you want to improve at. Break it down to its simple part, and then like look at it, the broad strokes of it, and then just keep swimming.
Just keep keeping on, man.
Yeah.
I think also the more you draw and the more you do this stuff, the less you feel like you need to learn how to draw things. Like, there's some things that I don't know how to draw, and they're probably never going to be in my visual library. But if it comes up that I need to draw it, I know that there's rinse out there. I know I can go outside and take a picture of it. Like, I can figure out how to get through those things.
Yeah. Like, I didn't learn how to draw like a old Ford, truck from like the 20s until I had, or whatever, until I had to draw Harrow County. But then I Googled so much, and then I drew for reference. So like, demand must, like, you have to draw this classroom for where your comic is, so might as well start Googling classrooms.
Yeah.
I'm saying this because I have to draw a classroom soon, and I'm like building myself up to it. I'm building myself to have to draw all those hairs. Okay.
SketchUp.
Oh,
SketchUp.
Yeah, SketchUp is a great tool. I think it's free.
It is.
Yeah.
And you can literally just find a classroom and then get the lines of it and then trace it.
Yeah, you can do that. And I think SketchUp has some like models you can download. You can download from their library.
Yeah.
I think you have to have an account with SketchUp for that. I don't remember.
No, you don't.
I think it might be a lot. Okay. Perfect.
I think it's funny that it's like, how do you challenge yourself? And then I'm like, just use SketchUp. Just put it in SketchUp. You're fine.
Dude, do not be afraid. Tracing isn't bad.
No.
Tracing is not bad at all. If you are having trouble figuring out how perspective works or how this thing works, get a Google reference photo, slap that ish down, and trace. As long as you're not doing it like exactly like to copy exactly what that picture is, but using it as like a base sketch, to build off of. I absolutely did that for like the final page of, I can't remember, I think it was like the second Squirrel Core issue that I did. I had to do like a New York City shot, like a full page splash, and I was like, RIP, I have to draw a cityscape. I just Googled like a picture of the Avengers Tower from the Avengers movie, and I used that as a base to draw like the rest of it out, because I'm trying to live. Work smarter, not harder. But SketchUp is great. It's a great reference. Clip Studio also has 3D models to work off of, like assets. And if you have an iPad, I think it's on Android too, there is a software. I think you can get 3 different versions of the software for like a $10 bundle, or you can get them for like a little less through the iStore, just for one version. Art Poser, I think is what it's called. Art Poser and an Art Poser Pro. That you can do 3D models of like male or female figures, and they just came out with the patch update where you have objects like chairs and desks and stuff. It's not like a whole lot, but it's like basic items that you can pose and use as references too. So I use those a lot to help get past struggling perspective and poses and everything, or just to make a random pose and then sketch it as practice,
So any last minute thoughts on this question, how to challenge yourself?
Do it.
Cool.
That's my thing, is that you just gotta get out and do it. Yeah.
Heck yeah.
Okay, and so thank you, Gamer Heroine, for your question. That struck fear in our hearts. Q, Nikki, how much do action or how much action do you leave undrawn? People say the action happens in the gutters, but how much can you leave in the gutters? That's a very good question. I really like that. Thank you, Q-Nikki. Does anyone want to go tackle that first, or?
I feel unqualified to answer.
Me too.
I can. I'll tack on first, and then hopefully you guys can have ideas, or we can just leave it. Having drawn some action, I guess. I'm pretty sure a lot of y'all are all qualified to draw this. This is just ridiculous. To answer this. You're all ridiculous. There is some stuff that you're not going to be able to draw in a single frame, like a single panel. A lot of times writers will put, this character, takes the coffee cup off the table and also turns to talk to this other person and is doing some other stuff, and it's all in the same panel, and you're like, no. So if there's multiple actions in one panel and you're not trying to do the comedic, like, double face, like, the double layer drawing thing, I don't know the actual word for it, but it looks like they have like 3 arms because their arm is flailing. That thing, if you're not trying to do that, figure out what action in that panel is the most important. Like, is them grabbing their coffee just kind of like a side action that you want to just skip? Is it them yelling the important part? Focus on that, draw that, and then people can fill in the dots between, like, they saw this coffee cup on the counter, like in the last panel, and this panel it's in their hands. They're gonna fill in, he grabbed the coffee cup. Duh. Mm-hmm. So those aren't super important. You can draw actions that look like they lead into the next panel action. Like, one of my favorite panels, because I'm just really happy with how it turned out in Harrow. Beatrice, like, backhands a goblin.
As you do.
Yeah, as you do. You backhand a goblin. And the action, the motion of the panel, of the action lines and the whole, like, character flowing away from the strike, leads the eye into the next panel where the goblin kind of does a bit of a roll, does a barrel roll and lands. But I drew the goblin in the landing pose and then just did some action lines and, like, the leaves blowing from the direction that it did the barrel roll in.
Nice.
So I skipped drawing the whole barrel roll thing and just focused on the final pose. And then your mind can picture, this goblin did some flippy stuff, to get on his feet. Or it could just be a simple thing. I think that's part of the fun of comics, is engaging the imagination of the reader as in what you don't draw and what you don't show them, because it's not a book. You can't, like, write a paragraph of every thing that happened, and it's not an animated thing where you can't show, like, the movement of everything that happens. So it's a collaborative effort between the creator and the reader, I think.
Yeah, I guess I had to do some of that. One of the first books I worked on, the script, when I got it, was like a 60 to 70 page document for a 20-page book. And a lot of it was, like, cramming so much into each panel. So I had to figure out, okay, what can I strip out? What doesn't actually need to be shown? What can I combine? And there definitely was a lot to be learned there, and figuring out how to, move the action without actually showing the action.
Can we take, like, a quick PSA and just say, like, writers, don't do that. Give us the Cliff Notes version, please.
Yeah, I think that's a good tip for any writers who are listening, or if you're an artist that also is writing, make it easier on yourself. Figure out what action is important in this panel. I try to think of panels as storyboards, because that helps me simplify and figure out what action is I want to show. But yeah, we don't need to. It's not important to the story or to the mood in the scene to see that they are, playing Candy Crush, while they're talking to you or something. It's not important unless it is important to the character, But that's for you as the writer or as the co-creator illustrating to decide what is important for the mood.
So I think, going back to this question of, like, how much action do you leave undrawn? I think Walter was saying, yeah, we were having this conversation yesterday about action, and Walter, you had some thoughts on it. I don't want to take your words. So.
Yeah, I mean, well, that was my I woke up in the middle of the night conversation, so I don't know how much of it I remember. But like, I think like one of the things is with that is, you know, with as many pages as we've all drawn, and I don't want to speak for you guys, but like, you know, for me, like, even though I've drawn like all these comic pages, like that's still something I struggle with on trying to figure out how much I can leave out. Like, how can I lead somebody from this panel to the next panel without having to draw, you know, all these things? Like, it's not, you know, you kind of have to make yourself get away from the idea of like animation, where you want to draw like every single step of like someone pulling something out of their pocket, unfolding it, looking at it, and you have to figure out like how to break that down into like maybe a single panel. And I think that only comes with a lot of practice and doing a lot of pages. And even then, you know, it's still something that you have to put a lot of thought into, and it's so situationally based. And so, yeah, I mean, it just takes a lot of time. And yeah, I mean, as far as like writers, I think a lot of writers come from the idea that maybe they're writing prose when they're writing comic scripts, and they don't really think that the script itself is a blueprint, you know, and you don't want to hide stuff from the construction workers. Like, you don't want to surprise them after the building's already made and be like, hey, by the way, like, you know, the ground is hollow, and you know, and so I don't think they think that, and they think like, you know, they have to write it like a reader is going to be reading it, and I don't think they think about it the way where, you know, we need to know everything that's happening, but we don't, you know, it doesn't need to be flowery either.
Yeah.
I think. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Walter just reminded me, or made me think something that he said just made me think of it. Like pulling something out of a note out of your pocket and having the character like open the note and read it. That also ties into pacing of the story, of the scene. If you are trying to figure out how much action to draw a character doing, how long do you want the scene to take? Do you want it to impact quick and immediate? Like, do you want the reader to just breeze past it, or do you want the mood to linger? And if you want it to linger because you want to stretch out dialogue, or you want to really enhance like a tense mood or something like that, then maybe drawing a panel for those little minute actions can help. Because if it's just quick wham bam, you see one panel, he's in the middle of pulling a note out of his pocket, and the next he's already got it open and he's like reading it. Or if it's like him to show him reaching, you know, tentatively for his pocket, show another panel of him pulling the note out, you know, while he's, you know, whatever's happening. That can change the mood of that scene entirely. You know, it's taking longer for him to get to this note, for this panel to get, for this scene. My roommates are excited about something. For the scene to happen, then this is a very important note, you know, this character has. Or, like, there's a lot of apprehension or whatever is in your script. So how much action you show or how much that you draw out will also affect the pace, you know? So I think that's something else to consider when you're thinking of what you want to leave between the gutters, or what you want to show explicitly, is how fast you want the scene to go through and like what the tone is.
Yeah, I think the common way that people say it is like either draw the beginning or the end of the action. And yeah.
Sometimes I'll just skip the beginning and the end, and I'll just do the middle, like. Oh, he's, you know, pulling laundry out or whatever. I'm just picking really menial tasks for these characters to do. And just, like, have the middle of it, because then they can assume, you know. And then, they can fill the blanks in, beginning and the end, too. But, like, the middle always feels like there's more action to it, you know? Or most things. And even if it's a very menial task, like a character doing laundry, you can still put some kind of motion into it if you start them in the middle of a task, I think.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
There is no right answer. You gotta feel it. You gotta close your eyes and feel the force.
But
Any last minute thoughts on that? I feel like we talked quite a bit about it.
Yeah. I hope we answered that question. I feel like a ramble.
That's what we do.
Yeah, that's what you get with us. We just ramble. All right. If no one else has anything to add, I will go on to the next one.
Yeah.
Okay. From Nicole, what is your approach to learning/studying a new technique, style, or topic? What have you found to be the easiest, hardest thing to learn so far? I think this might be different than Gamer Heroine's question about like challenging yourself and trying to grow.
Yeah, it seems much more specific.
Yeah. Like just doing studies of, figure drawing or still life, or practicing a new like painting technique or drawing technique or whatever. If anyone has any specific thoughts on that.
I think the important part about studying is for you to be present and actively thinking about what it is that you're doing. So things like you can copy a drawing or like do a study of a figure, let's say, but if you're not actively thinking about the leg is going this way, which means that it's like coming at me, which means that it's like shortening the leg this much, and like if you're not thinking about these things when you're drawing it and you're just mindlessly drawing it, you're gonna learn it a lot slower than if you were trying to break it down and make it make more sense to you, basically.
That's a good point. Being mindful of your studies. That's really good.
Thanks.
Sorry, I'm just like, wow. Like I knew, like it's something I do, but like hearing it said out loud is like, oh my god.
So refreshing.
So refreshing. I'm learning things.
And like I think the most illustrative way that I can say that I can like say it, I guess, is things like if you're studying how light works and you're looking at an object, you want to identify what's causing each of the effects that you're seeing. So like if you're seeing a really dark shadow, try and figure out why that dark shadow is there, that kind of stuff. Instead of just copying that there is a dark shadow there. And don't be afraid to take notes on your studies. Like actually write on them. Like if you, I've just realized that I have visual things here. I apologize for people who are listening to the podcast. Go to YouTube.
Yeah.
But if you notice that when you're shading this cube, that up here is darker than down here, don't be afraid to be like, darkest point. And then you could be like, but why? Question mark, and then like try and theorize on it. But the worst thing that you can do, I think, is to just mindlessly just make that the darkest point and then not think about it.
Yeah, especially if you're actively trying to learn. Because sometimes I will just do like studies just to kind of blank, if I just need to zone out and just need to chill, I'll just, do a landscape study or speed paint or something.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's just about moving your pen across the page.
Yeah. Move it.
Any other thoughts?
No, I think y'all pretty much summed it up.
Yeah. I will also, like, if I'm trying to, let's just, for example, say I'm trying to remind myself how to do digital painting and how to get back into the mindset of painting versus doing line art or, like, cell shading. Because I'll be just doing that for comics or for work. I'm just doing that, and then I forget. Like, I don't have the practice still to go back and think in a more sculptural mindset for painting, which is when you're painting, it's easier to think of it as a sculpture, like a three-dimensional thing with like mass and volume than it is to just think of a flat illustration. I will sometimes find other artists who will, maybe they record their painting process, and I will watch them, and I will study that video, and I'll be like, oh, are they starting with sketches? Are they starting with line work? Or are they just blocking in generic color or like undercolor, like a tone underneath, and then going back in and working in shadows first? Or are they blocking in lights? And then I will go from watching that and like studying and noting how they are, what they're doing first, and then go into doing practice and stuff with that mind, with those notes in mind. I don't take actual physical notes. I just take, mental reminders. But, sometimes writing the notes down helps because it gives you the muscle memory of doing it, just like with drawing practice, But I think the hardest part for me is when I've been doing something for so long, trying to learn something else and like shifting my brain into like a different mode is the hardest part, I think, for me with trying to learn new techniques or styles or something. But that's just kind of a given, and that's just a hurdle that you're going to have to work on because I think that's how our brains are programmed sometimes. But yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Agreed.
Next question is from Tricky.
Tricky.
Digit. He snuck in here with the good question.
The real reason that he's not here because he has a question for us.
Exactly. He doesn't want to answer his own question. He goes, "Hey guys, what are your thoughts?" Sounds just like him. Hey guys, welcome to my YouTube. What are your thoughts on doing commissions of other people's OCs? How much of your own artistic preference do you put into them to make them look quote-unquote better or make more sense? Wow.
That question just blew my mind. I've never thought about drawing like if Ethan came up to me and was like, will you hire me to, or will you pay me to, if he asked me to draw Naomi's OC, I feel like that would be really weird.
Well, have you ever drawn like Batman or like something like that?
Yeah, but like, and I know that's really the same thing, but at the same time, it feels like that's owned by like a big company as opposed to someone coming up to you and asking you to draw like random indie developer, their passion project or whatever. That seems like you would. I would almost be like, you should go ask her to draw her.
Yeah. Well, I think it's more. This may just come from like an anime convention, like weeb moment. You'll have excuse me. When I do commissions at tables, I had so many people who come up and they're young people. They're not even doing like, or they're just doing it for fun. They're not even doing like indie comics, or it's not even like, oh, can you draw, this character from this person's webcomic? It's like, can you draw this OC that I made? And it's literally like my cat person self-insert or something. Which no shade on that. I'm not trying to poo-poo anyone's fun because I absolutely have that OC from middle school that I still am not ashamed of.
I was gonna say we were all there.
We're all there. Let's be real. But a lot of times when people ask to do commissions of their OCs, I feel like that's a lot more personal than like, oh, can you do this fan art commission of like an OC from a webcomic or somebody from like Critical Role or like or the Adventure Zone or one of those, they're super popular right now and I'm very behind. I feel like an old lady. Like, what are the kids are into these days? And someone's calling me. I'm gonna ignore that. My brain just veered away.
So,
oh my god. Sorry. I was reading this thought and then my phone distracted me and I completely forgot what I was gonna say.
I've definitely had that happen at anime conventions, and honestly, those are some of my favorite commissions to do. When someone comes up and says, "Hey, here's a character that I designed. I'd love to see your interpretation of the character or your take on the character." I think that's a lot of fun to do, and like way more fun than, "Hey, can you draw Batman or Spider-Man or one of those characters that's been drawn millions of times by so many different people already."
Yeah, I know what I was going to say now before my phone distracted me. They feel like those kind of small OC commissions, they feel a lot more personal than like, draw Batman. So if it's something that I can tell is like a personal, like just someone's OC that they do, where they write with their friend or whatever, I try not to go like too far into, oh, how can I make this better or how can I change this design? Because I'll do that for like licensed characters, like because whatever, they're everybody's character at this point. But if it's somebody's like personal OC, I'll draw what they give me. But if the design isn't very clear, because sometimes they'll give me fan art or drawings that they've done really quickly that aren't super clear to me, and then I'll just try to interpret them as quickly as I can, or as best as I can, not as quickly as I can, and try to just make that fit in my style, I guess, and how I draw characters and just things in general. Because sometimes people are just really out there anime is wild. So they come out here with like Dragon Ball Z spiky hair, and I'm
This hair is
my
not a
God.
Euclidean shape.
yeah, this is wild. This defies all physics. How do I want to draw this? But if it's like, draw Batman, I'm like, whatever, I'm going to draw. That's fan art, not OC. There's differentiation between that, I think.
Yeah. I mean, if someone comes up to me asking for me to draw something, I think there's always a certain level of, well, how would I translate it? Kind of the same way, like if I got hired to draw Batman right now.
Yeah.
Well, how do I draw Batman? And so even with someone's OC, I do the same thing somewhat. But that also depends on, kind of like you said, what sources they give you to begin with. Because I've had some where they have really well-developed sources, in which case I'm like, okay, you've already thought through all what you want. I'm going to give you what you asked for. I had one instance where I drew someone else's OC and they gave me a really bad screenshot from the DC Heroes video game, DC Universe Online, whatever it was called, and a long written out description. And the picture was so pixelated that I couldn't tell what was going on. So I was like, it's cool. You gave me a description. I'll just go off of the description and what little bits I can get from the picture. And when I finished it, their response was, the character you drew is great, but it's not my character. So when you redraw it, this is what you're going to do.
Jeez.
Wow. Okay.
Get on that as soon as you give me another $100, buddy.
I know, right? Listen, you gave me 5 pixels and a paragraph.
Yeah.
Okay. I've been fortunate. Some people have come up and say like, oh, this is, an outfit that I usually draw them in, but you can draw them in, something else if you want, So I'm like, oh, that's fun. Then it's like, oh God, what kind of outfit with this character? You've given me too much pressure. No, that's too much responsibility.
So I feel like Tricky, you're saying like make them look better, and I think that no matter whatever you think makes that character look better is how you should draw that character. That's my opinion, because the person is approaching you to be like, you do these cool things, I want to see you make this thing your version of cool.
Yeah.
Right? So I don't think that there's any limits on there other than like it's subjective, right? But there's really no limits other than what your client wants, right?
Yeah.
So like I would personally just go buck wild on it and just be like, whatever I think looks cooler is the way that I'm going to do it. I wouldn't necessarily make a character that isn't cyberpunk without consulting my client. But
definitely draw don't draw a completely different character. You're still drawing the same like character, but that's a good point.
I feel like he's working on a commission right now.
Definitely
have fun with it.
Yeah,
100%. Yeah, you should have fun, Becky. They're gonna love it.
Yeah.
So
I think that was the last question. I don't know if we.
Yeah. There was none from the YouTube. There was somebody we added a topic from, just because it was a little bit more complex of a question.
Cool.
I see Tricky typing. Hang on.
Everyone's waiting.
Typing. Ominous.
Edge of the seat.
He just put one letter in there and he's just watching us wait for her.
He's giving people time.
For anyone who's listening who doesn't know, Tricky is the other artist who's usually on podcasts with us.
Yeah.
Usually.
He could not join us today, so he's heckling us from the audience now.
Usually, aka the first time.
The one other time.
That one other time we did this thing. Thanks, guys. Also, if you guys want to each draw me a body part to help me finish this commission, thanks.
Throw it in a draw pile, Tricky.
Frankenstein.
Yeah, draw pile.
Yeah.
You said a body part. Doesn't have to be specific to a person, right? Can I give it like a whale tail? Like.
Oh man, people should start commissioning the Illustrati, where we all just draw a different part of their character. That would be the commission. Yeah.
Oh man, that'd be fun.
That'd be really fun.
I'd be down. Tricky, what are you saying more?
Ask your client, Tricky.
Yeah. Can I give them a whale tail? An actual tail, not a thong.
Who did the sword and the cabbage?
Does anyone want some cabbage drawings?
Yeah. Tricky said the Voltron commission would be hot, and I agree. Let's make it happen. Voltron pinup commission. Got it.
Well, I mean, we all have our villains, right?
Yeah.
Time to Voltron them.
Exactly. We're just all gonna stack on top of, like, Ethan's shoulders. Like the robot shoulders, everyone just pile on. It's like a cheerleading pyramid.
Perfect. So, were there any other questions? As a reminder, if you want to ask us questions, go on our Discord, find the Illcast Questions channel, and ask us there.
I got one that came in through chat here.
Okay.
Toxic Ramen says, I was wondering, should I worry about shading since I usually use flat colors?
I think that's a question for Toxic to answer.
Yeah.
Take that.
There's not a right or a wrong way for you to color. I think it's just a question of what you want to do and what you think best serves your style and the finished product you're looking for.
You don't have to shade.
No, you can absolutely do flats. There are a lot of artists out there, like Chewed Raws does a lot of just flat colors, maybe with cell shading. But the palette looks great, and you really don't need to do shading if your line work is super strong, or even if it's not. It's whatever you want to do, honestly.
Style choice.
Style choice. But I will say, if you start a project, if it's for a comic and you start a project flat, and then like halfway through the story, like through one issue, you start shading, just be consistent, I guess. You know,
Yeah.
like consistency is great.
I mean, if they did it halfway through, I don't think that I would care, other than just like, oh, cool, shading.
Shade these cabbages.
Yeah.
My cabbages.
Like, I wasn't planning on coloring any of this, but I'm happy that's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was my CPA that called me. Taxes. All right. I don't know if there's any other questions. I think I got all of them.
Yeah. Cool. So this has been the Illustrati Illcast. I guess we'll go through and say our names.
Cool. Same order. I'm Daniel
Yeah,
Hooker. I'm Daniel Hooker. I'm an illustrator. I work at a literacy organization and do comics on the side.
I am Naomi Frankis, freelance illustrator and comic book artist. You can find me at Naomi Frank on Twitter and Instagram. And I have done Harrow County, Tales from Harrow County to Esquire with Dark Horse, The Planet with Image, a lot of stuff. Do the Googles.
I'm Hoyt Silva. I'm also a comic book artist and cover illustrator, and currently am posting and doing the art for Mongrel on Webtoon Canvas.
I am Walter Osley. I'm also a comic book creator. I have 3 comics as webcomics you can read for free, and you can find me at walterosley.com.
And I'm Ethan S. Brewerton, another comic illustrator. Who'da thunk? I draw Cog and Flame. I do some Mechadoodle stuff. I made a coloring book. Check that out on my website and all my social media through my website at ethansbrewerton.com. And so this has been the Illustrati Illcast. Thanks for hanging out.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.